This 8-hour course will teach you the fundamentals of Node.js and Express, so you can start creating back-end and full-stack web apps using JavaScript. This course was created by John Smilga. John has created a bunch of courses, including many of the more popular courses on the Free Code Camp YouTube channel. John's teaching is very hands-on, so you will create a bunch of projects while you're learning.
What's up, everybody? This is John from Coding Addict, and welcome to Node and Express tutorial video, where we'll cover fundamental building blocks of Node and Express.js framework. Now, since I want everyone to be on the same page, we'll start the series with Node and Express fundamentals and gradually move to more complex topics. We will build complex REST API with Express.js as well as full-blown MERN application. In this comprehensive Node.js course, you will not only learn fundamentals of Node, but also many related technologies like Express.js framework, MongoDB, as well as Mongoose. The main goal of the course is to show you how to build modern, fast, and scalable server-side web applications with Node. Like in all my other courses, to solidify our knowledge, we'll build a bunch of cool apps and go through the steps of deployment as well. Lastly, let me just say this. If you're like me and you enjoy learning new tech by building projects instead of going through the slides, you will enjoy this course. All right, and let's start by answering the most obvious question first. What is Node.js? And even though there are plenty of good answers out there, the one that I like the most is this one. Node.js is an environment to run JavaScript outside of the browser. Node.js was created in 2009, and it's built on top of Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. As you probably are aware of, every browser has an engine, a tool that compiles our code down to machine code, and Chrome uses one by the name of V8. In extremely simple terms, the creator of Node, Ryan Dahl, ripped out the V8 engine and built Node on top of it. Since the moment it was created, Node has evolved tremendously. And while there are many things to like about Node, I particularly enjoy large community around Node, since that tremendously saves time on feature development, as well as the fact that with the help of Node, it's never been easier to build full stack apps, since both front-end and back-end are essentially built in the same language. And you guessed it, that language is our beloved JavaScript. As far as course requirements go, there are not that many. My expectation is that you are familiar with basic HTML elements, simple CSS rules, and have general understanding of JavaScript, especially ES6, callbacks, promises, and async await. Since this is a Node course, and I already have tremendous amount of Node content to cover, I'm not going to spend too much time on JavaScript language fundamentals. While you can still follow along with the course without knowing basics, it's crucial if you want to understand how stuff works behind the scenes. As a side note, if you need to brush up on the JavaScript fundamentals, I have a YouTube channel called Coding Addict, where I post a bunch of cool JavaScript related content. Specifically, you might be interested in JS Nuggets playlist, where I cover a bunch of useful ES6 features, as well as asynchronous JavaScript topics. So if you need to jog your memory on JavaScript fundamentals, I suggest going to YouTube, look for the channel by the name of Coding Addict, and then more specifically, the playlist by the name of JavaScript Nuggets. When it comes to course structure, it goes something like this. In the first section, we'll get familiar with Node.js, as well as my dev setup. In the second section, we're going to install Node.js and quickly cover some general differences between Browser.js and Node.js. Then we'll spend some time on Node.js fundamentals in section 3. And after that, we'll learn what is Express.js in section number 4. And once we're done with Node and Express fundamentals, so once we're done with pleasantries, then we're off to the races, where effectively in every section after that, we will build a bunch of cool Node.js apps. All right. And before we install Node, let's quickly cover some major differences between browser JavaScript and Node.js. So essentially how Node.js apps are different from the browser JavaScript apps. And let's start with the biggest one. When working on Node.js app, you have no access, let me repeat, no access to browser APIs. Since, well, they don't simply exist in Node. There is no browser. So there's no DOM, there's no geolocation, no fetch, and all the other cool browser goodies. You see, unlike browser apps that are interactive, for example, user clicks the button or toggles the nav and that sort of thing, with Node, we build server-side apps. And I know it's hard to picture that right now, but our Node apps will only consist of pure logic without the graphical interface. On that note, you know how in browser apps we use a bunch of cool things available on the window object. Yeah, sorry to break it to you, but that's also not available in Node. So at no point in the course we'll write document.querySelector. All right. And once we have covered things that Node.js does not have, let's switch gears and see some of the goodies that Node has to offer. For example, unlike browser, we can access file system, info about our operating system, respond to network requests, just to name a few. Also, another major benefit of Node is the fact that it's based on versions. So unlike browser apps, which depend on the user's browser, our Node app depends only on Node.js version it was built in. So in other words, if we build a browser app, and if our user's browser does not support a specific feature, it is our responsibility to fix it. Otherwise, our app might have bugs, correct? But when we're done building our Node app, there's no rule that we have to upgrade to a newer Node.js version and possibly break our app. We simply can keep running our Node app in the version it was built in and without any worries go on about our day. Lastly, unlike browsers where modules are optional, in Node.js you have access to modules by default. And it's hard to imagine a Node app where you're not going to use them. As a quick side note, under the hood, Node.js uses CommonJS library for the modules. And while the general idea is exactly the same as for the ES6 modules that we use in the browser, syntax is a bit different. As far as the install, it's as straightforward as it gets. Just navigate to nodejs.org, pick a LTS version, answer yes to all the questions, and if you don't get some weird bugs, congrats, you have installed Node. In order to check if everything went correct, just type node -- version in your terminal and you should see the version number. If you don't, you'll have to troubleshoot the error. Now, as much as I would like to help, when it comes to install, it's impossible for me to troubleshoot your local setup. So when it comes to troubleshooting install errors, I strongly suggest using your favorite search engine instead. Typically, within a matter of minutes, you'll see a bunch of useful solutions to your exact problem. Lastly, let's also talk about versions. As you can see, at the time of the recording, I have two options, 14 LTS or 15 current one. If you read the Node docs, you'll see that for production apps, they always suggest using LTS, which stands for long-term support. And therefore, I will also suggest the same, but as far as tutorial, I don't think you'll have any issues if you use the current version instead. Now, also, since you're watching this in the future, your version number most likely is going to be greater than 14, basically greater than mine. I definitely suggest installing the LTS option that's offered to you instead of downgrading to my version. And if you're stressing about content being out of date, let me assure you that everything we cover in the course will work perfectly fine with your current Node version. And eventually, if some bugs do creep in, I will definitely update the course content. So long story short, just install your current LTS version, whatever it is, and you'll be in good shape. So in my case, it is 14. I have two big buttons. And of course, since I would want to go with LTS, I'll click on the left one. Then notice we are getting the download package. And now I just need to go to my downloads and then crack it open. And then, like I said, we just need to answer yes to all the questions. So we go with continue, continue, and yep, I would agree. And again, we just install, and then we'll be prompted for our password. And once we add that one, we should be in good shape. And then, like I said, once the install is complete, and yep, we'll move this sucker to the trash. Then if we go to our terminal, and if I massively zoom in, and if I type node -- version, there it is. I should have my version number, which in my case, of course, is 14. If you also can see the node version in your terminal, you are in good shape and you can continue with the videos. If not, please troubleshoot it, because otherwise everything we're about to do next is not going to work since you haven't installed Node on your computer. Install is complete. Hopefully we all have Node on our machines. Now what? What do we do? For contrast with vanilla.js, it was somewhat easy, right? We create index.html, jam our JavaScript code, whichever way we prefer, and browser does the rest. It evaluates our JavaScript code. But what about Node? How do we get Node to evaluate our code? And effectively, we have two options. A Repl, which stands for read, eval, print loop, and CLI executable, which just means running our app code in Node. If I have to be perfectly honest, Repl is for playing around, and CLI is essentially for everything else. In fact, this is going to be the first and most likely the only time we'll use a Repl in this course. And after that, CLI is going to be our best friend. How do we spin up the Repl? Well, we go to terminal, and in terminal, we simply type node, and then no arguments, nothing. We just press return or enter, however you would like to call the button, and that's it. Now notice we have this little angle bracket. That just means that we are in a Repl. And once we are in a Repl, we can do Repl things. What would be a first Repl thing we can do? Well, we can simply type our name. So const, and the name is equal to John. And there it is. Of course, now I can access name, and my name is John. As you can see, you're not going to write anything serious in here. And if you have written any vanilla JavaScript apps, you know that, of course, we can also do the same thing in a browser console. So we can also evaluate some code there, but of course, we're not going to write anything serious in a browser's console. So the same thing is for Repl. Yes, we can come here, we can play around. But when it comes to serious applications, of course, you'll pick a CLI executable instead. And in order to close the Repl, we simply go with Control and C. And as you can see, we have a suggestion that we need to press it again. And now, of course, we're out of the Repl. Not bad, not bad. We now know how the Repl works. But what about a more serious Node application? How do we get Node to evaluate our code? Well, we would need to start by creating a project, right? So back on my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, and surprise, surprise, I will call this tutorial. Why? Well, because we'll do tutorially things. And I'm going to say tutorial. Now, of course, if you want, you can add Node, but I'm just going to leave it as a tutorial. And then, of course, we'll have to use our text editor. In my case, like I already previously mentioned, I'm using Visual Studio Code, and my preferred method is just drag and drop. And then inside of the folder, what I would want is to create a new file. And this is the case where you can literally name it whatever you would want. And in my case, I'm going to go with app and JS. And in this app.js, again, I would want to write some more serious Node program. And the program is going to be following where there is a const. So there's a variable by the name of amount. And as a side note, I'll make this bigger, and I'll probably bump up the font size just so we can see a bit clearer. So we're going to go with const, and you know what? I'll also close the sidebar. Hopefully you see that I have the file by the name of app.js. And like I previously mentioned, we're going to have a variable by the name of amount, and it's going to be equal to 12. And now let's set up a if condition where if amount is less than 10, then we simply console log small number, and otherwise we'll just say that the number is large. So we go with if, and we're looking for amount is less than 10. And if that is the case, we go with console log, and we'll just say small number. And otherwise, if it is, of course, equal or bigger than 10, then we go with console log and we say large number. And at the end of the day, we just write console log, hey, it's my first node app. As you can see, an extremely complicated functionality. And in this case, I'm just going to set up the template strings so you understand that, of course, we can use them here as well. I'll say, hey, it's my first node app. And if you want, of course, you can jam the hello world there somewhere as well, because that is the traditional approach with the first program. And then in order to execute this code, we effectively have two options. I can navigate back to my terminal and I can zoom in like so. And of course, now I'm in a root, so I would need to navigate to the desktop. And probably the fastest way is just typing cd and drag and drop my folder here. Okay, so now here, as you can see, I'm in the tutorial. And in order to execute my code, I just need to type node and then app.js. Now, keep in mind that technically I could have done that from the root. I would just need to provide the full path where I go to users, blah, 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 and then tutorial. And of course, the file name is app.js. And let me bump up the font size even more. And the moment we run it, check it out. We have a large number. And hey, it's my first node app. Now, if you don't believe me, we can go back and we, for example, can say that the number is 9. And of course, again, we would need to run the code. And we're going to go with node and then app.js. Beautiful. We have small number and we still have our, hey, it's my first node app. Again, the whole point of this line here is just to showcase that not only we can use quotation marks, but also we can use the template string as well. So that's one option. But if you're familiar with VS Code, you know that it has this cool feature of integrated terminal, where effectively we have our terminal, but it is right away pointing to our folder. So we don't need to do this whole dance where we navigate to the folder and then run the app. We simply can open this up, and the shortcut is Control and tilde. And also keep in mind that, of course, you can navigate through the tabs. The problem is that I always forget where it is. And effectively, we need to go to View, and then you're looking for this terminal command here. As you can see, this would be a shortcut, Control and tilde. And in here, we have a nice suggestion that we are already located in tutorial folder. And what do we need to do? Well, again, we just go with node app.js. Why? Well, because that is my file name. So for the remainder of the course, I'll use the integrated terminal that comes with VS Code. Just understand that both of them effectively do the same thing. And there it is. Now I run node app.js because that, of course, is the file name. And I have small number and hey, it's my first node app. And that's how we can evaluate a more serious code using Node. As a note, if at any point during the course you need to compare your code to mine, just navigate to website johnsmilga.com. Again, the website is johnsmilga.com. And then either in the project page or in the homepage, you'll find Node Express tutorial project. So in the homepage, you'll find it in the latest project. So just keep on scrolling. But if it's not here, it's definitely going to be in the projects page. And you can even filter it in order to save some time. So look for Node in here. Like I said, the project name is Node Express tutorial. And that any of these links will get you to the repo. And at this point, you can either clone it, fork it, or just simply download, and you're looking for this Node tutorial. And in here, you'll find all the folders as well as the files. Now, keep in mind that eventually, when we start working on Express, we'll have to get this repo anyway, because I'll use it for a starter, since I have prepared some assets for you, some assets that we're going to use in our examples. So this is really up to you. If you want, you can get it right now. Just keep